No question has really been fully comprehended until it has been fully posed and its assumptions understood. No question has been comprehended until its assumptions have been understood after it has been fully posed. So, if a person, for example, says, I don't believe in God because there is too much evil in this world. I've had that said to me in a university setting in Nottingham. I've used that illustration so many times. A guy stood up and said, too much of evil in this world, there's no God. And I said, you don't believe that? He said, I do. We carried on this way for a back and forth. Some of you have probably seen in my books or in my Q&A CDs or whatever it is. And I said to him, when you say there's such a thing as evil, aren't you assuming there's such a thing as good? He said, yes. I said, when you assume there's such a thing as good, aren't you assuming there's such a thing as a moral law by which to differentiate between good and evil? You must have a point of reference by which to differentiate between good and evil. He sort of hooed and hawed about that a bit, and I gave him the illustration of Bertrand Russell debating the Jesuit philosopher Frederick Copleston, when Copleston said to him, Mr. Russell, how do you differentiate between good and bad? Russell said, the same way I differentiate between blue and green. Copleston said, wait a minute, you differentiate between blue and green by seeing, don't you? He said, yes. How do you differentiate between good and bad? And here's this brilliant mathematician philosopher. Do you know what his answer was? On the basis of my feeling. What else? Well, Copleston was kind. Had I been there, I'd been very tempted to say, Mr. Russell, in some cultures they love their neighbors, in other cultures they eat them. Do you have a personal feeling about which is better of these two? See, when you say there's evil, there's good. When you say there's good, there's a moral law, and he granted that. I said, but if you assume there's a moral law, you must posit a moral lawgiver, but that's whom you're trying to disprove and not prove. If there's no moral lawgiver, there's no moral law. If there's no moral law, there's no good. If there's no good, there's no evil. What is your question? He stood there, looked at me and said, what then am I asking you? I knew what he was asking me, but I was just trying to remind him, logically, this is a chaotic question as much for the questioner as it is for the one being questioned. There is no absolute